Psychiatrists of Reddit, has working with a depressed client ever taken a negative toll on your life? If so, how? Hey, not sure if this has been said already, but it ought to be, so here goes. This applies to all you folks who think you're depressed or know that you are. Please go talk to a psychiatrist. Don't let these stories make you feel like you'd be burdening anyone. They're there to do a job, and the vast majority of the time they really do want to help. Don't be put off by thinking you're just a nuisance. If you need help, then get it. My mother was an RN and became very good at emotional detachment. I learned this the time I cut the palm of my hand pretty badly climbing a tree. I was 10 and had to walk about 10 minutes home to get it fixed up. It wasn't really that bad, although I do still have a scar, but it was bleeding a lot. I knew from experience that my mom would be pissed if I got blood on my clothes, so I walked home holding my hand up, which only resulted in covering my entire arm in blood. When I walked into the house, I said, "Mom," and she gasped. Then suddenly her face changed, and she became an entirely different personality. She was polite but firm, and not at all interested in what happened. She took me to the bathroom, washed off all the blood, cleaned and bandaged the wound, and then washed up and put away all the supplies. Then she turned back into my mom and cried. Later, she became a school nurse, and that did eventually get to her. Finally, she had to retire early because of the sad things she saw, but could not change. Was going to become a psychiatrist, but after dealing with multiple teen suicide pacts that we could not seem to stop, chickened out and went with family medicine. About half of my day is spent dealing with patients' psychiatric disorders. Draining but rewarding. If it was my whole day, I would not be able to handle it. Always grateful there are docs/NPS that are made of tougher stuff than me. Not exactly what you asked, but I feel like it's in the same ballpark. As a therapist, I have spent a good deal of time working with traumatized individuals and families. We receive regular training and supervision to help deal with vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue. In this line of work, it's not hard to fall into a trap of letting your empathy for the client overwhelm you and have negative impact on your personal life outside of work. I had a therapist who was the most compassionate woman I've ever met. I loved her so much. She clearly cared for all of her clients. It was sliding scale therapy, so eventually she moved on to bigger and better things, which she deserved. But I knew she cared about me and all her clients more than I've seen any other therapist care for. I have no idea if it took its toll, but she never let it show. She was just a sweet, helpful woman. If you're reading this, Laura, thank you. You brought me out of 22 years of depression, and I'm still going strong. Thank you for being a therapist everyone deserves. A high suicide rate among psychiatrists, 58 to 6500,000 compared with that of the general population, 1100,000, is the toll that it takes on this professional group. I'm not suggesting that working with depressed/psychotic clients is the only factor involved. You need to remember one magic word as it comes to interaction with your patients: empathy only. Anything over and above is a recipe for trouble. Psychiatrist here, almost retired from practice, 55 plus years old. I work in Neuroiku and had a 22-year-old who attempted suicide. He shot himself. He had placed the gun, pistol, 357, if I recall correctly, under his chin. The angle was such that he blew the bottom half of his face apart, and the shockwave fractured the underside of his cranium. His brain was left unaffected, but his head as a whole was well traumatized. He was totally neurologically intact and remembered everything. He had had a pretty hard life in his short 22 years. Drug addicted, abusive parents, homelessness, multiple assaults, friends dying left and right due to drug overdoses, etc. His main concern was that we, the staff, would just lump him in with the rest of the crazies and he would get written off as a psychiatric lost cause. Due to the nature of his injuries, he was unable to speak for the time being, and this was all communicated to me in writing. I assured him that we, the staff, we are absolutely interested in working with him to improve his situation, and that, because he was so badly physically injured, he would be with us for a while, and that he should take every opportunity to find some psychological and emotional center. He cried and I held him. and he was finally able to get a full night's sleep for the first time in 2 weeks. By the time my next shift came around, he had been transferred to another department. I cried when I got home that day. I don't think it fucked me up, but I will always remember him, and I hope he is doing at least okay. Currently working on master's degree in marriage and family therapy and interning as a therapist. I have worked with clients with schizophrenia, early onset dementia, suicidal teens, couples on the verge of divorce, severely depressed individuals, and substance users. It is a very taxing job. You have a session with a depressed teen, and then 10 minutes later you have a session with a bickering couple, and then you have one with a man who talks to himself more than he talks to you, and then a man who has dementia and can't remember that we've had the same conversation 4 times now. To say that you're not affected would be a lie. At the end of the day you're emotionally drained, and then you have to go home to your own life and emotions, and sometimes you have nothing left to give. In particular, the man that I see with early onset dementia is the one who has affected me the most. He tells me that he wants a full-time job, but sometimes he forgets how to drive or where he is. He has a hard time accepting what is happening to him, and I have a hard time making him face the truth. Making him understand that his life will never be the same, and that it only gets worse from here. His wife and him are low income, and he is progressing faster into dementia each day. The state refuses to give him any disability. As a clinical social worker, I have had a number of clients/patients over the years who have been able to break through the protective barriers I had worked hard to put into place. I'm a human first. Being a therapist is secondary. A few times, I have cried in front of a client/patient due to feeling overwhelmed by the emotions being shared or displayed. I have to work hard to make sure I do not put any of my own feelings on the other person, though, so I'm quick to let people know that my tears are just me reflecting back the emotions they are putting out. Having good supervision was very important in my early career. I've been doing this for 15 years now. Learning about vicarious trauma, transference and countertransference, and ways to protect myself were all key parts of learning my job beyond what any classroom or textbook could teach. I have lost sleep over my clients/patients. I spent one Christmas Eve crying alone on my front porch thinking about a client who had told me the day before about the last time he had seen his father. I have taken the long way home many times, just so I can drive in silence, or listen to my music and clear my head before coming home and dealing with my own life. I started smoking cigarettes shortly after becoming a therapist because it gave me an excuse to go outside, be alone, and clear my head after seeing people. Regarding the question of a psychotic patient and questioning my reality, no, usually when someone is psychotic, I get that pit in my stomach feeling, and my barriers and boundaries are strong. I think it is much easier to get sucked into the intense emotions of sadness, anger, or grief/loss than it is to start to believe someone who is expressing paranoid ideation, delusional content, or hallucinations. Currently in grad school for counseling and work at a treatment center for teenage girls who don't wanna be there. Of course it occurs. The quote I heard from one of the counselors on staff was, "When the girls are good, I'm good." Imagine being around your best, most positive, most interesting group of friends, and what that does for your mental state. Now, imagine being around people, though they don't want to be this way, who are depressed, unstable, highly reactive. It's draining. You gotta put up strong boundaries between yourself and the other person, and watch for countertransference, where you take on feelings and situational aspects of the client. I found that I need rituals, like washing my face, or taking a walk, or having a beer, not at home, before I return home to really separate work/home life. Yes, we worry about you. A lot. We have training in school to help us recognize this, recognize our own reactions, and try to limit this while still being empathic. It is hard. I could give you several stories of people I was scared to let out of my office, scared of what they might do. But here's the thing, we are not in control, they are. We try like hell to offer any help we can. Sometimes it's not enough. How does this affect me? Sometimes at night and distracted because of concern about someone. Sometimes I cry because of things that happened. And then I have to answer my children saying, "Who hurt you, mama?" I explain that I try to help sick people and sometimes it helps, sometimes it does not. But you know what is worse than all of that? When people see my non-reactive face and accuse me of not caring, of doing the job for money. They have no idea how wrong they are. There are 1,000 jobs I could do that would not be this emotionally demanding. I do this because I've been there. I've hurt like they hurt. I've had family struggles that have almost killed me. But I can't tell them that. Why? Because it's not about me. It's about them and their experience. It's selfish and inappropriate to say I felt like that too. So just because I don't react like your friends doesn't mean I don't care. Not myself, but my mom. She's a clinical psychologist and helps people with traumatic pasts. In the beginning she was not used the sheer level of emotional transference she had to cope with. She would receive a lot of raw anger and pain from people who were not used to talking about their past. It took a toll at first. Now she's a pro. I'm a grad student working on becoming a therapist, but I've been working and studying in the field for 4 years now. The answer is yes. And I think it would be weird for someone to say that they haven't experienced some form of depression or upsetting feelings after working with suffering day in and day out. A lot of my personal trauma and bad memories come from working in a psychiatric inpatient facility. In this place I saw patients get greyhound treatment, got assaulted by patients, and had to go to the hospital, witnessed large men attack my small female cowhawkers, saw a man bite another man's ear off, got things thrown at me a lot, had to intervene a man getting murdered when I was alone on the unit with 13 schizophrenic people, and the thing that sticks my memory as the worst is working on a bipolar adolescent unit where I had to help the security crew force strip a suicidal girl naked because she kept hiding string and things to hurt herself with. Now, if you go through all of this and feel nothing, there is something wrong with you. As far as psychotics go, this is the population I've worked with the most. They do not make me question reality as a whole, but they let me know that multiple ways of experiencing reality exist. By this I mean, I could be sitting next to a patient with schizophrenia. I do not hear his voices, nor see the world the way he does. Everything in the world of this person screams destruction and doom. The world is falling apart, even when they are in a safe place, and they are connected to nothing and no one. But sitting next to him, I'm fine. He's falling apart. We are occupying the same place and time, but two realities are existing, and both of them are right. This is where the psychotic runs into a lot of trouble. The absolute worst thing you can say to a psychotic is your voices aren't real, and they are a hallucination. If you were to say to me the computer in front of you is not real, I'd say fuck you, I see it, yes it is real. My mother is a child psychologist. Not specifically depression, but particularly heinous cases can have a serious effect on her. The worst are the cases where the child is in an abusive household or exposed to an abusive person, and she can't do anything about it. She will testify in cases where a child is physically, sexually, and otherwise emotionally abused, and the judge will put the kid back in the household. Pretty sick shit. It is not a career lacking in tribulations, and it leads many to burnout. It's amazing to me that after 30 years she still finds the will to give a shit every day.